So I'd like you to welcome our first and most recent National Tourism Award winning writer. He was a contributor to this, so I'm not going to let him claim it all, but totalling nearly over 15 years of working at Visit Canberra. This guy not only has been a former committee member of the Magpies Football Club in Canberra, has also probably done nearly every job at Australian Cable Tourism, and it is alleged one day he actually filled in as CEO. So Justin Lalor, come on down. And yeah, I probably had to do a bit more work on that introduction, but you have been involved longer than anybody I know in tourism awards, except the person that just walked in the room, David. I think David has been entering tourism awards before you might have started at Australian Cable Tourism. David from Bungadore Woodworks Gallery. When was the first tourism award that you entered that you can remember?
1991.
When did you start at Australian Cable Tourism?
Well, after that, it was about 97, 98.
Oh, okay, so there you go. So there is an older sage in the room. But tourism awards has changed a lot during your time. You were entering. What was the first one that you worked on?
Probably would have been either one of the Floriade or Subaru Rally of Canberra ones, I think, back in the day. So our event-based ones.
And you worked on those events as well?
Yes. Yeah.
And back in the day, it was 50 questions, unlimited attachments.
Yeah, 50 pages, unlimited attachments. Probably more a philosophy that the more you could pack in there, the better. Squeeze the text down, chuck as many attachments in as you could. To be honest, it was a pretty arduous process. I think that made it a really arduous and tedious process. But I think today now, thankfully, things have shifted to more a less is more approach. You really got to try and tell your story, convey your passion, really highlight the key components of your product that are worthy of local and national recognition. So I think now 30 pages, not having to worry about the attachments. So it gives you a good platform to start and really plan out how you're going to write your submission.
More is less, less is more?
I think less is more in terms of, I don't think, if you're going to approach it by whacking out 30 pages of text and then thinking you've got to chuck in a diagram here and a table there and having to start to cut down, that's just not the way to approach it. So I think if you can get your point across in a nice, concise and succinct manner, I think that's far better than waffle. I think that's something that really does need to be avoided at all costs. So.
You've entered a number of times into the tourism awards, and you've worked on submissions that have one on a Canberra level, one on an Australian level. But you've also worked, or you've been part of the organisation, you may not have worked on the submission on those years, maybe they had to bring you back. But some years the submission, I know for a fact, and I was told that some years it didn't actually get put in because it wasn't good enough, and some years it was actually judged to have not even got a commendation. What were the factors that were happening internally that led to you getting across the line or not getting across the line, or how did the formula change on those years when it did get up or it didn't?
Yeah, I think it's probably all related to resourcing and time. I think particularly with this last one, we knew that it was certainly a national award winning, or was worthy of winning a national award. So made a real emphasis to make sure that I planned out the process in sort of meticulous detail. Set aside a good week and a bit to sort of attack each question. Get a draft in prepared well in advance so you could go through the mentoring program and those types of things so you can get some independent feedback. Leave plenty of room in your responses. Like, I think it was a 30-page submission, so I was looking at trying to do about 4 pages for each question. For 5 questions, that's 20 pages. Leaves you 10 pages to chuck in some great images, chuck in some great quotes from consumers, chuck in some great tables and other bits and pieces to help really sort of sell the document. The times where I think it's failed, I think you almost know from the get-go whether you're going to be confident or not that it's going to compete at a level or whether it's up to scratch. And I think there were times where the organisation probably left it to the last minute or left it late in the piece, didn't have the adequate resourcing, didn't have the right people writing the submission that were intimately involved in the product and could really get the key messages across. So I think that's probably where you really need to set yourself to make sure you give yourself the chance to put your best foot forward.
you might know the actual number or just an estimate number. How many tourism award submissions do you think that you've worked on?
I've written, this one and another Floriade one were the ones that I pretty much did myself sort of from scratch. And there's been others where as part of the events team or just helping out with reading and editing, probably, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 submissions over that period.
Right, so you've had the last month to go 8 times. Right now, it's the last month to go. Some people are entering for the first time, some people aren't. How do you get to that point where you're not just trying to fill in the boxes and race the clock and still keep the quality level up and not just think, oh, I've got to scrap for this or I've got to scrap for that? Coming back to that less is more, how do you just keep that level head and make sure that you don't just go to the fill and spill methodology and or the spill and fill, I should say, spill it all out, fill in the boxes, get it in. How do you make sure that in that last week that it's still award-winning prose or award-winning stats, or you're not just... Have you ever got to the point where you've just started lying?
No, is the official answer to that question.
Okay. Yeah.
Look, this one I was particularly conscious of making it an enjoyable read for the judging panel. I know that they're going to go through heaps of submissions in their time. It really needed to be something that stood out. So my aim was to make it an enjoyable process for them. But I think really thinking about the format and the tone that I wrote the submission in as well. I gave it a bit of a slightly playful edge, which I think kind of matched the way that the Human Brochure campaign in itself was rolled out. I think, I wanted to, from the early stages, make sure that I did have a plan in terms of the key points that I wanted to get across. Wanted to highlight that it was a campaign that had the support of the entire Canberra region tourism industry. So there were quite a number of little key milestones and key elements that I wanted to make sure that came across in the submission. And I think, thinking very detailed about the way I was going to get that across right through the process, made sure that it didn't become a real scrap and a rush at the end of the day.
So can we just take a moment to have a look at this? And we've actually got a few copies here, so that we might get an able-bodied assistant to pass around if you just want to have a quick look amongst your groups here. And we just have to ask that this remains in the room, so don't just stash it in your bag. But how do you balance? So my real question here, Justin, is how do you balance that playfulness without losing the ability to answer the question, without turning into a comedian and without becoming loose in your language and still making people realise that you've got a professional product? Because I look at this, question one background, outline the rationale and objectives behind your marketing campaign. It said Canberra equals boring. And I know that was actually one of the challenges and one of the things that you're addressing, but are you allowed to start like that? Are you allowed to start a tourism award like that?
Yeah, well, I think each question, there were little elements of bold text where I sort of started and just threw some sort of key things out on the page, and that certainly wasn't to say that Canberra was boring. It was just very clearly throwing out the perception that is out there, and I think if we've all been frank and honest, we've all heard that before. And from then on, I think that the entire submission was about dispelling that myth and others and showing how the Human Brochure helped us do that. So I don't think you need to shy away from being a little bit edgy in some cases, taking some risks with the way that you get across your message. But I think if you're going to write a very technical, arduous read, it's not going to stand you in good stead. I don't think it's going to be fairly dry reading for the judges. It needs to be something that leaps off the page and gets their attention.
Have more chance to win the corporate report awards rather than the tourism awards.
Correct.
You reckon?
Yeah.
In terms of, for me, just looking at some of the formatting things that you've done here, I can see nothing that is boring to the fact that, would you say that that's a table or a diagram, or because that's an excellent way to use a whole page, but somebody's going a whole page just to tell 5 or 6 different facts?
Yeah, well, I think that basically just talks you through the entire process of the Human Brochure from the time that we called for entries through to the the sort of key outcomes that we achieved through the process. And I could have spent maybe 2 or 3 pages writing that out in detail, step by step, how it was done. But I think that in itself is just a great way to get it across in a very colourful way, but also, they do say a picture tells 1,000 words, and I think that's a good way of just very clearly getting across basically the campaign in a nutshell. So.
Yeah, so you can be a bit smart with the way that you use images and diagrams and things like that.
Yep.
Here's the biggest challenge that I get asked about a lot. How about we put links to video? This is submitted digitally, right? We've just printed it out for the purposes of actually handing it around today. A screenshot of a video? Tell me the rationale of the thinking behind that.
I think there were just a number of key elements in terms of how we introduced the campaign to consumers, and so one of them was obviously via the website with an introductory video, and I think it was just something that we just did. It was just a screen grab of the video. Again, it's just another way of just...
helps judges get into the feeling of what they can't see on paper, right?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, and it's a bit hard to say, have a look at our fantastic, innovative, creative, engaging social media program via the next 30 flat 2D pages that you'll be reading via your laptop online.
Yep.
So you really have to make it come off the page in so many different ways, but there are limitations in which you can do it, right? Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I think, as you said before, I think the use of our images throughout the document probably saved us many pages of written text. So it helped us focus on getting those key points across in the available space that we had.
I know for a fact you've just been on holidays. You've just been to, where did you go?
I went to Fiji for a week. Which was
great. And before you left, how many, I'm not going to go into the detail, but before you left, how many review sites and things did you look at to try and work out where you wanted to stay?
If I'm being honest, my wife did it also. I didn't know.
How many did she look at, do you think? Did she go online? Did she shop in brochures? Or did she go and read things like TripAdvisor and pick up reviews and try to find out from total strangers what they think?
I think, there was a little bit of review online. We also went with some friends who had been to Fiji before, so it was a bit of that word of mouth chat. But I must admit, afterwards I did a bit of TripAdvisor checking around about the resort we're staying at.
That she made the right decision?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so I guess the point that I'm leading to here, where does the value of a testimonial sit these days? I've read a number of tourism awards, and sometimes I feel like it's like some people write War and Peace and they photocopy a whole letter and put it in there, but you've got a simple one-line pull quote here that says, "As we discovered, the real Canberra is a fascinating place." Ben Alcock. So, do you need to have the full thank you letter written by Arnie Marge, or can you paraphrase and pull a line? And is there still value in testimonials? Do you think it's gone up or down in terms of tourism awards stakes?
I think it's probably gone upwards, absolutely. Yeah, that real life testimonial and real life advocacy for your product or your business is crucial. So we were very lucky through the Human Brochure that, given it was through an online platform and a social media platform, we had plenty of capacity to take grabs from people's feedback. There were instances, I think there is one in there, a bit of a snapshot of a letter from one of the hotels, I think, that participated, just thanking us post-campaign, just about the way that we communicated with the industry, and that in itself was a really useful thing.
Exhibit A.
Yeah, it was a really useful thing to put in there because it really did very well communicate, I guess, industry support for the campaign as well. So
there's two really good ideas for how to actually pull a line out of somebody's feedback or a testimonial. Don't just paraphrase. Or the second one, if it's a verbatim, if the whole piece actually provides context and tells a really great story, really recreate that or leave it as it was and tell the story of what was received to give a bit more authenticity to that feedback. So I think that's really smart. Going through this and writing it, okay, so I could sit here, let me be a cynic, and I can sit here and say, that's Visit Canberra, this was a $500,000 campaign, and they had, 45 industry partners, and they've got Justin, he's done it 8 times, and it's going to be really easy for them. We're a small business, we're doing it for the first time, or we're a not-for-profit, this is being done after hours in our spare time. do you have to have a graphic designer to hot this up and make it look fantastic? What's the leveling factor that you can see in this that everybody can do, and they don't just have to be a highly, because I know the truth behind the doors that you guys make a lot out of a very little, and we're one of the lowest funded STOs in Australia, but you do turn a lot. You get a lot of results out of a small pie. What is the sort of the leveling factor that everyone can make this accessible to get to a national award-winning standard like this?
Yeah.
Does everyone have to wait to do it 8 times, learn the lessons and everything? But what are the factors in this that everyone can learn from?
Yeah, I don't think you need to have done it 8 times. I think. Yeah, you mentioned briefly about the graphic design stuff. Yeah, it does come in handy if you can present it in a really great way that helps highlight your submission in an engaging tone. But I think the fundamental principle is belief in your product, belief in that it is worthy of recognition at a local and a national level. And then being able to really convey that passion in your submission, and also making sure that your responses. I think you've done the technical stuff before, making sure that the questions do adequately address the criteria. But I think if you've got that belief and passion in your product, then you've got a really good founding for putting together a submission. So.
I quite like this as a snapshot. Think about. Images don't just need to be an image with a caption with a box. This is a collage of images that actually tells the story of 6 different platforms, 6 different pieces of content developed into one image that tells a really fantastic story. So the cliche is think outside the box. Definitely think outside the caption box. Every image that you use needs to tell a story in itself. Don't have an answer in an image, have the answer here and use the image to back it up and reinforce, and make sure that the person reading it, the judge, unequivocally understands the point you're trying to make, and also understands that you mean it, you can prove it, and here it is on the page. That's hard. That's 2 paragraphs with a few dot points of answer with half a page of reinforcement. So don't get stuck in the word factory. Don't get stuck in the paragraphs of prose land and making sure that you just have to keep talking. Telling a visual story and telling that storytelling is really important.
Yeah. So I think just about every image in there was strategically placed. It wasn't just a space filler at the end of the day. As Todd said, it did link in intricately with the text for each of those responses.
So question 5, and everybody's question is going to be, everyone's questions are going to be different. I'm glad to see you do have some boring tables that just have stats and numbers, but so they're still allowed, right? Yeah. And you do have like a full page of text. I just need to put a bit of balance around here. It's not just a glossy picture magazine. But how much of this do you reckon you cut out? Of the amount of information that you pulled together, how much ended up on the cutting room floor? Or did you actually work up to that 20 pages and get to your limit? Or did you start with 30 or 40 pages of potential content and you cut it down?
No, I've done that, fallen into that trap before, just throwing everything on paper without much thought, and then trying to cut and whittle away, and then it becomes very hard. You think, I can't get rid of that bit, and it just becomes you're trimming fat off the bone, and it's just a really difficult process. So, as I said before, I think I approached really trying to get my approach for this time was to get each question reasonably polished before I moved on to the next one, trying to keep it to no more than 5 pages. Once I was happy, then I was comfortable with moving on. And then at the end of the day, really I didn't have to cut down too much at all. Once it was laid up in the correct format, there was plenty of room for the images and tables to go in, and it wasn't a tricky process. I've been there before. You've had to chuck stuff out that might have been useful because you've just jammed too much text in from the outset.
So the last line, so the first line it said Canberra equals boring. That's the first line of your submission. The last line of your submission says, and that's the sort of coverage you just can't buy. Canberra equals boring, not a chance.
Yeah.
But that's inspired.
Well, I guess, yeah.
Is that how you started?
Yeah, it was again, a conscious effort to make it, like I said, an engaging read, and it was a bit of a story, so I did try and step them through the process. So it wasn't 5 distinct questions that didn't really have a link to each other. It did really try and flow throughout. So, yeah.
How do you rate your skills as a storyteller? I know you've got a couple of kids and you probably have to be a good storyteller from now and then, but how do you rate you've written a storybook here, it's 30 pages, there's a different chapter on a different part. You had a few threads going through, you had a beginning, middle and end. Is that a suitable explanation of it, or have I taken you too far into...
No, that's pretty close. I think my written skills have always been a pretty strong point, so I think that's why I was probably given the gig in the first place. But yeah, I did take a lot of pride in pulling together the story of the Human Brochure, and so I certainly felt a lot of pressure coming into the process of writing it because, as I said, I knew it was a campaign that was worthy of national recognition, so I wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves the best chance of doing that, and really shining the spotlight on the Canberra region, because I think we do punch above our weight, and it was definitely worthy of recognition given the amount of industry support we had. So
just between us, final question before I'll take some questions from everybody here. Just between us, nobody else is listening. What time did you get this in?
It was the day before, which is just bizarre. I've seen people doing handbrake turns into the car park out the front of the office and other bits and pieces before. And I remember trying to get the binder to work with about 3 minutes to go before the deadline. So it was, this is easily the most smooth award submission that I've ever put together. And I think probably the fact that it did come out with some national recognition probably tells you that doing it that way and from the outset with a very planned process is the way to go.
Judges can see that come through in your submission, can't they? They can feel it, they can read it, and they can feel it dropping off, or they can feel the stress building. Or
I think judges will always say there are submissions where they can see that you start out like a house on fire, and then as the deadline looms, it does drop off. So it can be spotted with those rush responses. So giving yourself as much time as you can to get it together is ideal. Yeah.
Great. And what's the deal with these today? Are we allowed to check these out and read them while people are here today?
Yeah, I think absolutely. While people are here today, more than welcome to have a read. So I'd love to be able to let people have a look at it.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions of Justin? So the question was around designers at the start, designers at the end. Do you give them your draft and say jazz that up, or do you work with them and saying how could we make this look visually appealing?
Yeah, I guess we're lucky. Our graphic designer is just a great guy that can pull things together really quickly. But I think...
Does he freelance? That's the
I could ask him about that. He's already bald, so he might lose a few more. No, with how I wrote it within the submission, there were elements where I did sort of highlight, what sort of images I wanted here, and so I guess when I did hand it over to him, it wasn't just a chunk of text and say you deal with it. It was a collaborative process where we did sit down and really talk in detail about what sort of images we wanted, what sort of look and feel we wanted through the document and that sort of thing as well. So it was a collaborative approach.
Everything still complies with the guidelines that are set out in the Tourism Awards. So this year there's no margins and things like that. So you can do full width images, but your text is still the good old boring Arial, and it's still 12 point. It's still 1.5 times space. Yep. How did the graphic designer feel about that?
He doesn't like it. He'd love to probably emit a bit more of his creative flair within the document, but I think we did the best that we could within the confines, and did really give him a really good brief beforehand, so he wasn't just left to his own devices basically. So. Yeah.
Any other questions of Justin? Well, Justin, thanks for being part of this and sharing, your process and what you actually went through.